Hey everybody, Kira here from Kira Plays Final Fantasy, and today we're gonna do episode 1 of our 10 episode series covering Final Fantasy Brave Exvius War of the Visions on mobile. This game has been my absolute obsession since I finished Final Fantasy VII Remake hard modes, and it's got everything that you could possibly want out of a Final Fantasy mobile game. It's got a tactics style manual play. It's got autoplay, so you don't even have to think about it. It's got gotcha summons and pay to win mechanics and a community that constantly threatens to rage quit when they don't get the overpowered units that the pay to wins get. It just genuinely is an absolute gem of a Final Fantasy game. So, I'm going to be doing a 10 episode series that will cover the details you'll need to know in order to be successful at the game. A lot of the things that I know I messed up on my early account because the game doesn't give you a lot of detail in game as you're going. And today on episode 1, we're going to be covering a lot of the really basic game mechanics as well as the fight mechanics, and in future episodes we'll dive more deeply into specific important topics like statistics and characters and espers and vision cards. But for right now, let's just run into those big things that might end up derailing your game, as well as the important nuances of the fighting systems so that you can ensure that you're making the right decisions when you get onto hard content later on. So with all of that being said, let's go ahead and mosey on here. Here we go. So we're going to start from the title page, and we're going to go ahead and click on the far plane. We'll go, oops, that's not the far plane. Far plane. And then up in the top hand corner here in the far plane, you'll see Beginner's Hall. And this is the game's like very beginning in-game fight tutorial system where you get to learn something about a mechanic of the combat system while doing a fight. And so this is a great place to come to learn the basic mechanics of the battle system of this game. As I mentioned, it's based on tactics. There's a lot of details that this section helps cover for you. If you actually haven't done Beginner's Hall, everybody should come check it out because as you can see, the rewards are pretty great. And I'm not going to actually run through a level here. I just want to cover some of the really basic mechanics that we need to understand in order to be effective later. So you can see there's this beginner's quest number 4, TP, AP, and limit breaks. Let's go ahead and start talking about TP and AP because those are really important in terms of how the combat system works. And so TP and AP are our spenders. TP you're going to be using to use buffs, debuffs, and magic, generally spells and abilities that aren't doing damage, and AP is where you're going to be dealing your damage. So let's dive into both of these stats and how they actually work. So let's start with TP. TP stands for technical points, and your characters are going to begin a battle with their TP gauge full. However, TP doesn't refill as you're attacking the way AP does, but it can be regenerated in a variety of different ways. There are spells and abilities that can bring it back. Stepping on crystals of dead monsters can do it. Most recent example, Warrior of Light's Trustmaster reward gives you a TP regen, so there's ways to get it back. And again, TP, these are your buffs, your debuffs, your white magic, things that generally aren't doing damage to the opponents. So that covers TP. Now let's talk about the fun one, that's AP, ability points. And so when you're trying to calculate how many ability points a character will have at the beginning of combat, you need to look at what their total AP is and then what type of job they have as their first job class. And so every character has 3 job classes, and your main one will help determine how much of your AP gauge is full at the beginning of a fight. So anybody who's played this game for a minute knows that our mages, like Mediana, the Ice Girl who drops that giant Cosmo Plume, she started off with 75% of her AP right off the bat. That's why we're able to see those big moves happen on turn 1. So that's the same case for all of mages except the red mages, so like your Miranda or your Adelard. Then you're going to see only 50% of your AP at start. And everybody else starts with just 18% of their AP to start. So they're going to want to be really strategic with their opening moves to ensure that they generate more AP so they can get some of their larger abilities off. And of course, we've got the little asterisks there just denoting, that there's obviously a chance that you could have a passive ability that's upgrading this. And then these are just the base numbers that we're talking about here. All right, now that we understand TP and AP and we understand that AP is how we deal damage, let's talk about how we get more AP so that we can do more damage. And so there's a couple of different ways that we can generate AP in this game. The first is to use a TP ability, in which you'll be generating AP at a factor of 50% of the TP used. And so a great example of this is if you have Ayaka's Trustmaster item, the Purify ability on it costs 42 TP to cast, one of the higher ones out there, in which case you'll get 21 AP for use immediately in the next round. And so you'll see commonly in high level content that people will ensure that they use their largest and most expensive TP moves in a starting round as a buffer round in order to build up that AP so that they can better effectively chain and build up more and more damage against the large raid bosses. There's some other general ways we can gain AP as well. A normal front attack gives you 8. If you sneak around the side, you get 14, and a back attack is worth 20. So it's always worthwhile to reposition your characters, not only for a higher accuracy or chance to crit, but also because you get more AP for it. There's also a couple of ways we can just get some bonus AP on top of this. Killing a target's 4, critting a target's 4. And AP can be regenerated in ways other than we're listing here. Probably one of the most infamous is with the Trustmaster reward that you get from the character Ziza. Her bells gives an AP regeneration. Also, the limited unit Orlando, as most people affectionately call him Sid, has the ability to auto refresh his AP as a reflex ability. Okay, so now we've covered the very basics of TP and AP. There's still one more little section that I think it's important we cover as we talk about combat mechanics. And again, we'll dive more into like stats and how all of this works more deeply in terms of with gear and in your characters in a future episode. But just in terms of understanding the basic fight and combat mechanics, the other one you'll want to pay attention to is the action orders and agility guide, number 11 right here. And so in this one, we're going to talk about, instead of AP, TPR spenders, we're going to talk about how turn order works and CT. So let's talk about what is CT and what is the action timeline. CT stands for charge time, and charge time is how turns work in War of the Visions. So in order for it to be a character's turn, they take a number that's 10% of their agility and continue to multiply it on top of itself until you get to 100. So let's say I've got my mount versus a skeleton. My mount has 100 agility, the skeleton has 90. We continue to add 10 and 9 on top of each other until eventually Mont will hit 100 while the skeleton is still at 90. It's not his turn yet. There will still be one more cycle before they'll be able to go again. And that's basically how CT works. And you can see as you're looking at your character screen during a fight, there will be a bar with a yellow CT gauge. And that's how you'll be able to tell where your character is at in that given cycle. The game does account for overflow on CT. So if you're doing something where you count over 100, those units will be added back to the beginning as the count up starts again. And then another important note with CT is that haste is a functionality within this as well. So when you cast haste on somebody, what you're really doing is giving them a 1.5 times multiplier to that agility calculation that we showed you above. All right. So that's charge time. Now let's talk about how do we actually use that time once it's our turn. So we're waiting for that to hit 100 and then we get to act, and then what happens? How do we get to be our turn again? Well, it depends on the actions you take, how much CT will end up being taken, and then that in itself will reflect how long it takes for it to be your turn again. And so on any given turn, you've got a couple of different options. You can choose to move, you could choose to move and attack, you could choose to just attack and not move, or you can choose to AFK and do neither, which a lot of people in multi do, and I don't recommend. And so you can see there are different costs there to each one of those decisions, with the most expensive being doing both things, taking a move and doing an action, with there being equal cost to moving only or acting only, and with you getting the least amount of a charge when you AFK, but you still shouldn't do it. It's just not good manners. And so that gives you a basic idea of why you see characters come back up more quickly in the turn order. It's either a direct result of how high their agility stat is as the CT charge is counting up, or it's because they have taken less actions or done less things, so their CT didn't get brought down as low as that calculation started over again. And that's why you'll notice when you don't take turns, or when you only move or you only act but you don't do the other, that your turn seems to come up more quickly. So, speaking of your turn coming up again, it's really important that you understand how the actions you take end up impacting turn order, especially later on, because it becomes an important mechanic of later raids to be able to do steal time abilities in order to interrupt the order in which a boss is going to attack, so that you can drive up the chain, the number of consecutive attacks in a row of a single type or element or both in order to drive up the amount of damage that you do. And so a lot of people don't notice this little arrow I've got highlighting here, that as you go to line up a cast, there's actually a button right there that says action order. You can choose a spell and then click that action order, and it'll bring back the list of character orders, and it'll show how what you're doing is about to impact the turn order, so that you can know whether or not you really should be doing this action or that one at a given time. So it's definitely worth checking out. You shouldn't be guessing about whether or not doing an activity will put you before or after the boss's next turn. You can easily just click that button and be able to take a look. So all of that covered how charge time and the action timeline works, but what about those of us who thought CT stood for cast time? Because that's how I thought it was as I was first looking at all this. In particular, since you see cast time as a statistic on a lot of the new and more popular vision cards. And so it's important to note that there is a difference between CT charge time that's used to calculate terms and the idea of CT cast time, which is on a different scale. And so similar to how agility, or at least 10% of it, is added to CT per cycle, for abilities and magics, it's a separate stat. It's a cast speed value added to their CT, and it's on a different scale. It's out of 1,000 as opposed to out of 100. And so when you're seeing some of these vision cards that say they reduced cast time by 200, or I'm sorry, 20 or 70. I think those are more the ranges that we're seeing in some of those higher level cards. It's not like 20 or 70 CT charge time. It's out of a completely different scale. So anyway, as we dive into character stats, I'll talk to you, and vision cards, I'll talk to you more about the strengths and weaknesses there. But it's important to note that these are on two separate scales as we're looking at our characters. All right. So that covers a lot of the beginning of fight mechanics, but there's a lot of other things that we can run into in War of the Visions that are tricky. So let's go ahead and take a look. We're still within that far plane area, and let's just quickly browse around all the different things we need to know within the far plane. If we go to events, you can see we've got sort of two categories here. Limited time events that will tell you specifically, ends in a certain amount of days. You can see that denoted there at the bottom. There's all different types, and so you're going to want to participate in all of them to get a feel of what they're like. But today I just want to draw our attention over to these day/trainings. These are the ones that aren't changing on us, and it's important for us to understand how these work. And so there's a bonus based on the day of the week that you're going in here. So you're going to want to plan accordingly. You can see right now, because I'm recording on a Saturday, that we can see drops ×2 within these training chambers. But if you ever are trying to plan out in advance when you should be farming in this area, you can just go ahead and click the little question mark up there, and it'll tell you the exact dates the days of the week that there are the ×2 drops, as you can see here. And it's important to note that over the weekend we get limitless gil and ore chambers. So if you're short on cash and or upgrades for your equipment, that's the time to go out and farm. All right, that covers sort of our daily trading in the events. Let's come back out. The rest of Farplane is where you're going to access a lot of the major events that are out there. So raids, which is a large single mob. Sometimes they're surrounded by supporting mobs, but you need to take down a large boss in order to progress to higher and higher levels of that same boss in order to farm medals to get a bonus piece of gear, which is usually the formula across the board. In multi, you'll see a lot of the same quests that you saw within events, but you'll be able to participate with the other players in order to do them. In which case, the bonuses that we talked about do not apply, but there are higher drop rates in multi and lower costs in terms of energy to launch in multi, as your incentivization for having to deal with other people. You can also see listed in here Porcelain Tower, not currently active, but we have had one Porcelain Tower event on Global. Think of this as sort of like your gauntlet. The next one's going to be the Deep Dungeon, which is just a perfect example of what Porcelain Tower event should be when you're thinking about a Final Fantasy game. It's just a long sprint in which you're only going to have once every 24 hours the ability to restore your characters. So it's important that you have a deep bench in order to progress through the tower. A lot of really cool videos came out during the last Porcelain Tower where some free-to-play players were taking their, normal, super rare characters through and really grinding out some of the challenging levels. So it was really fun to watch people who had fully developed their parties instead of just leaning into 2 or 3 UR units, which I think a lot of us tend to do. And then finally, the Beast Den is where we'll go to get upgrade materials for our Espers, but that's something that we'll talk about more on our Esper video. The last thing I'll point to you here, and you can access this from the main menu as well, is let's go over to story mode. There's a new section of story mode that usually comes out on a regular basis. We just recently got Chapter 8 dropped, so the story in this game is constantly evolving. But the thing I want to draw your attention to is if we click on World Quests here, it's really important that you do your 10 hard mode quests every day. And the reason why you want to do your 10 hard mode quests every day is because they drop shards for your characters to enhance their limit breaks, which is the thing that you need to do in order to increase their powers and allow them to get up to 99 maximum level, as well as what you need to do in order to get them to get your Trustmaster reward. So when you're in here, you can zoom in within the world map and find different hard mode quests, but honestly, the easiest way is to just go in through the unit itself. JP has had an enhancement to its map so that it's not nearly as complicated as ours is, but once you know which units you're looking to really upgrade on, you can go to the unit itself, and then you can click on their limit break, and then you can see that their shard quest is listed right there, and it'll take you right to it. And so I've already done my 10 hard quests today, and you can only do 10 in a day total. So you'll want to make sure that the characters you're raising, you do that so you can get as many shards as possible. Definitely worth your time every day. Also out here in the world quest, there's a list of sub-quests that you can take part in. Let's go back into that. So you can see, oh, no, you can't because my computer picture covers it. Down here in this bottom corner, there's a sub-quest list, and these are like non-fighting quests that you can do that will usually be activities you were going to do anyway, like craft a piece of gear or participate in arena. It's just when new chapters come out, sometimes there's new ones there, so it's important to just pay attention. All right. Let's talk about another nuance that a lot of characters or a lot of people don't notice as they're first setting up their accounts, and that's the formation setting up here in the top corner. It's important to set your formations, and in particular on the guild battle, it has a very unintuitive UI in which we have to ensure that we set, and let me move this out of the way here, both our attack and our defense. And so it's important that you set up a party here. You don't just leave your one default mont because the way guild battles are calculated, the other team will take 3 stars even if you only put a single character in there. So you want to put your absolute best foot forward when you're looking at positioning your guild battle. But it's important that you fill all of these out, and you may even want to consider using this drop down here to build out a couple of different teams. Like, for example, if there's a team that you're going to be using skip tickets on because you don't care about grinding up their espers, or if you have a team you're grinding on as opposed to your A team for hard stuff, you can make all of those decisions within here as well. All right, so that covers formation. Let's talk about the guild system within War of the Visions, because I absolutely love it. We can go ahead and click on guild down here on the bottom. All right, and so there's a couple of things we want to make sure that we're doing every day for our guild so that we can be a good guild member and so that we can fully maximize the opportunity within the guild. You'll always want to make sure you hit this attend button once a day, and it's important because you can see the number of attendance there is going to impact your rewards. So if you have at least 20 or more people attending that button every day, then you're going to be getting the maximum amount of rewards. So that's a big difference between getting 20 and 40 Viswar. So it's something you want to pay attention to. All of your guildies should be doing it. There's some other options that are in here as well. You can see my guild right now is at Platinum 3. And we actually have a system where we boot if you miss 2 battles in a row, but we aren't booting anybody for performance. There are some more hardcore guilds out there that if you're not carrying a certain amount of stars, they'll kick you. You can also see the guild statues. Your team is going to decide which one of these you guys want to target down first. We actually just recently finished leveling up you can see our lion statue just hit 5 out of 10. That's exciting. And we also have our guild node out here that we're all supposed to be leveling Serpent. I'm going to do a whole video breaking down guild, but I just wanted to make sure everybody knows. Come in here, hit the attend button, and make sure you're doing your guild statues and participating in the battle event every day in order to make sure you're being a good participating member of your guild. All right, let's talk about chocobos. Another area where a lot of beginners will stumble, and I know a place I messed up really early on, is the chocobo expedition over here. Now, chocobo expeditions are running 24 hours a day, so it's just a matter of, and I'm going to move me up to the corner here so we can see our buttons. It's just a matter of making sure that you are hitting your collect button before there's any overflow. And so you've got the opportunity to expand how many items can sit here before you're capped out. I think you start with a default of 40. I've upgraded mine a couple of times. I feel pretty good about 70. I never end up letting anything sit from there. And then when you collect, you can see you can get all kinds of different items. The important thing you'll want to pay attention to here is the fact that when I click that formation, I've got an option to change which of these expeditions I'm going out on, so I can focus down a particular piece of magicite, which is what's commonly dropped here, which is used for leveling up your esper. So if there's a new esper or a particular esper that I'm looking to level up, I can make sure that I choose to send out my party onto the expedition that best fits them. Right now I have mine in a very generic get every kind of units out there. You also want to pay attention to your bonus unit, and so you can see there's a couple of different tiers of bonus units, and these change depending on what's going on with the banner at the given time. So I find that I throw in whatever my top bonus unit is, even if they're already at max EXP, just so that I can get these increases to the XL magicite, as well as the increased experience and speed. When you do that, you'll see that little warning there. Yes, I know I'm sending people out who already have experience. You can see that there's multiple parties that you can send out to expeditions. The number, when you can send them out and how you can add more is based on your royal rank. And so I don't have this last one, but I do have the expedition party 2. Same deal here, you can hit formation. You can never set both parties to be going on the same expedition. You can only set them to go on separate ones. You can see right now I have Chocobo Fever going on right now, and that is a rare spawn that will happen usually about if you're farming it a little over every hour, and it will spawn if you're doing anything other than multiplayer, basically. You need to be doing some sort of single player quest that costs you Visoire, and you have a chance to spawn this Chocobo Fever. It lasts an hour, and that's the time where if you're ever going to use any high-speed expedition tickets, that you'll want to do them. I'm capped out at the moment right now, but there are different events that will give you Chocobo Expedition tickets, or there's ways that you can buy them in the shops. But these basically just run the clock up on your expedition equal to that amount of time and give you the experience and drops from that period of time. So you always want to make sure you're spending those tickets when you have a fever proc, so that you have that higher percent chance of getting those rare items. You can also choose to expand and unlock these to have more characters who are going out on the expeditions. And it's important to note that the benefit of expedition isn't just that magicite that you're able to gain to level up your espers, but it actually does give experience points to these characters. And so you'll want to choose characters that you're looking to level up. All right. Let's talk about the Whimsy Shop next. So very similar to Chocobo Fever, there's also a chance to proc an additional bonus store called the Whimsy Shop. And I don't have the Whimsy Shop up right now, but let's just go to the general shop and we'll talk about how we can spawn the Whimsy Shop and where the user interface for it is. All right, so you can see, before I slide me back down, you can see on the normal shop, the top one we're on here, that there's a button down in the bottom right-hand corner that you can click to update. Now, the first time that you update, it is for free. The second time you update, it's for a cost of 10 Visoire. The third time you update, you can do it for a cost of 50. And then after that, it'll depend on your royal rank, how many more times you can update. And the benefit of updating the shop is additional chances to get the shards for these characters. And so you'll see at the top of the normal shop, there are usually a combination of shards for both characters and vision cards. The more and more you're in here, you'll recognize that there's a pattern to the order that these things show up. Usually if there's going to be a Mont or a Zazan, one of the ones that you only have to pay guild to get their shards, so they'll be in this first slot. You'll notice that whatever vision card there is will always be in this slot here. And you'll notice there's usually either an experience cube or an egg or adamantite, something that's a level up ability there. Couple of normal items here. You do not want to turn your nose up at some of these normal items. I know the regular staff that shows up in here when you level it up has a better stat on it than that iron staff that a lot of people end up using in early game. So you just want to pay attention to the statistics, and we'll dive more into that on the character one. And as we look through, you can see there's a ton of crafting recipes, materials that you need to level up jobs, as well as crafting materials that will all show up here. Now, just like we were able to proc that Chocobo Fever while going out on normal quests, anything other than multiplayer, you can also proc a Whimsy Shop, which is a very similar setup to the normal shop here and actually has a tab across the top right next to missions when it shows up. And it will also show up on your home page right above this item exchange position. And they only last for a half hour, so even shorter than the Chocobo Fever does. And so you'll want to make sure that you're paying attention when you're farming to when the Whimsy Shop procs, so that you can check and make sure that any of those characters that you care about getting those shards, you take that opportunity to grab them, particularly if there are any limited time characters that you're going for. All right. Wow, we covered a whole lot of stuff here. I think those were most of the things that tripped me up early in the game, although we're going to cover a ton more details in the additional episodes. I want to take a second and just say thank you to everybody who stayed and listened this long, but in particular to two really great YouTubers who have gotten a lot of my information from. And one of them is Dr. Diggs, and everybody should go out there and like and subscribe him right now. He's an amazing, family-friendly streamer who's just done a great job of explaining the details and the nuance of this game. Plus, he's super interesting and fun, and his husband, Giant, does just the absolute cutest art on the planet. I love them so much. Go check them out on Twitch. I'll put links down in the description. And then I also want to say thanks to theorycraft games, and I absolutely love his analysis because he plays on the JP version, and we'll go over one of our episodes in the 10 episode series. We'll talk about how you look at like the future events coming up in JP in order to help make good strategic decisions with your Bizwar. But definitely go check him out because Diggs is great, but he's not playing JP, so he's taking a lot of information from like Ultima secondhand. So if you're looking for somebody who like speaks and reads Japanese and knows exactly how the events are going, go check him out because it's great. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. Thanks everybody for sticking through with episode 1. Can't wait to do more. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Thanks.